What if your next penny could make you rich? The rarest Lincoln pennies have been known to fetch thousands of dollars. Find out which ones you should keep your eyes out for. Welcome to the world of rare coins, where one small piece of history could be worth more than you ever imagined. Watch till the end because you won't believe which pennies could make you a fortune. The 1970 US 1-cent penny, often overlooked in everyday life, holds a fascinating and significant place in American coinage history. For most, the penny is a coin of little value, often discarded or left to gather dust in the bottom of a drawer. However, for a small group of passionate collectors and numismatists, the penny, especially the 1970 version, can represent much more than just its face value. It embodies the story of the US Mint, the evolution of coinage, and the unexpected twists of fate that make some coins extraordinarily valuable. To understand the allure of the 1970 penny, it's essential to first explore the historical context of the time. The year 1970 was a time of great change and turbulence in America. The country was navigating the aftermath of the 1960s, a decade of civil unrest, political turmoil, and social upheaval. The Vietnam War raged on, and the U.S. economy was in the midst of a recession. Despite these challenges, the United States Mint was focused on continuing its long-standing tradition of producing coins that would be used by millions of Americans every day. In 1970, the design of the penny was not drastically different from what it had been for decades. The penny, or 1-cent coin, had been in circulation since 1793, and throughout much of the 20th century, it had featured the image of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. The 1970 penny was no exception. It featured the familiar portrait of Lincoln on the obverse, with the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty" surrounding his image. On the reverse side, the penny featured the traditional image of the Lincoln Memorial, with the words, "United States of America," and "E Pluribus Unum" inscribed around the edges. However, while the design was familiar, the 1970 penny was part of a significant shift in the way coins were produced. In 1965, the U.S. Mint had made the decision to remove silver from most of its coins, including the dime, quarter, and half dollar, replacing it with copper-nickel clad. The penny, which had previously been made of 95% copper, was also changed. In 1962, the composition of the penny was altered to 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which continued through 1970. However, the year 1970 would be particularly significant for penny collectors due to a rare and unusual error that occurred during the minting process. In 1970, the U.S. Mint faced a growing demand for pennies. The coin was one of the most commonly circulated pieces of currency in America, and the Mint struggled to keep up with the need. As a result, they relied heavily on the production of pennies at two different facilities, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. However, what collectors didn't know at the time was that the Denver Mint had made an interesting and rare mistake during the production process. At the Denver Mint, a small number of 1970 pennies were mistakenly struck with a proof die. A proof coin is a special coin that is struck with polished dies and is often produced for collectors in limited quantities. These coins are not intended for general circulation, and they are usually produced with higher quality standards. However, due to a mix-up in the minting process, a small number of 1970 pennies were struck with these proof dies, creating a coin with a much higher level of detail and finish than the typical circulation strike. The mistake went unnoticed at first, and these proof-like coins were released into circulation along with the regular, mass-produced pennies. But over time, collectors began to notice the differences in appearance between the regular pennies and these unusual proof-like coins. The proof-like 1970 pennies had a distinct, mirror-like finish that set them apart from the typical penny, which had a more matte finish. These coins became a subject of fascination and intrigue for numismatists, who quickly realized that they were quite rare. In the years following the release of the 1970 penny, word began to spread about the existence of these rare proof-like coins. As with many other rare coins, the excitement surrounding them grew, and the hunt for these elusive pennies became a popular pursuit for collectors. Over time, it became clear that the number of these proof-like 1970 pennies in existence was very small. In fact, it is estimated that only a few hundred of these coins were ever struck. The value of the 1970 proof-like penny began to rise, but it wasn't until much later that collectors and investors would realize just how valuable these coins could become. As time passed, more and more of these rare pennies were discovered, and their value continued to increase. In the world of numismatics, where rarity and condition are key factors in determining value, the 1970 proof-like penny became one of the most sought-after coins of the era. By the 1980s and 1990s, the 1970 penny had become a staple of coin auctions and collectors' shows. As collectors scrambled to find these rare coins, the value of the 1970 proof-like penny skyrocketed. It was no longer just a curiosity, it was a coveted piece of American history. As the demand for these rare coins grew, so did their value. But the biggest surprise came in the 2000s, when a particularly pristine 1970 proof-like penny was sold at auction for an astonishing price. In 2005, a 1970 penny that had been graded as mint state by professional numismatists sold for an incredible $118,000. This sale was a game-changer in the world of numismatics, and it cemented the 1970 penny's place as one of the most valuable and sought-after coins in American history. So, what makes the 1970 penny so valuable today? The primary factor is its rarity. While the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies in 1970, only a small number were struck with the proof dies at the Denver Mint. This error, combined with the fact that many of these coins were worn down or damaged over time, means that only a handful of pristine examples remain. Collectors are willing to pay top dollar for these coins, as they represent a rare and unique piece of American coinage history. Today, the 1970 U.S. penny is more than just a coin, it's a symbol of the unexpected twists of fate that can make something seemingly ordinary into something extraordinary. For those fortunate enough to own one of these rare pennies, it represents both a financial windfall and a connection to a moment in history. The 1970 penny is a reminder that even the most humble of coins can carry with them a story of rarity, value, and the passage of time. So, the next time you encounter a 1970 penny, take a closer look. It might not seem like much, but that little piece of copper could hold the key to unlocking a piece of American history worth far more than you could ever imagine. As we've seen, this penny could very well be worth a staggering $118,000, a true testament to the allure of rare coins and the fascinating world of numismatics. For many of us, the penny is just that, small, insignificant, and often forgotten about. It's the coin we toss into a jar, drop on the ground without a second thought, or collect in a drawer until it's time to take it to the bank. But what if I told you that one particular penny, the 1983 US 1-cent coin, has the potential to be worth a small fortune? While pennies are often seen as the least valuable of U.S. currency, this one stands out in ways you wouldn't expect. It's a coin that seems ordinary on the surface but carries with it a fascinating story, and a value that could leave you in shock. In order to understand what makes the 1983 penny so special, we need to take a step back and look at the historical context of the time. The 1980s were a period of significant change in the United States. The economy was still recovering from the aftermath of the late 1970s recession, inflation was on the rise, and the country was facing global economic shifts. During this time, the U.S. Mint was also dealing with challenges of its own, specifically, the rising cost of metals, which directly impacted the production of coins, including the penny. For much of the 20th century, U.S. pennies were made of copper, specifically, 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. However, by the early 1980s, the price of copper had soared, making it increasingly expensive for the mint to continue using the metal for the penny. In response to this growing cost, the mint made a pivotal decision. In 1982, they began to transition the composition of the penny from 95% copper to a much cheaper combination of 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper. This new blend of metals would allow the mint to continue producing pennies without the steep cost of copper. The 1983 penny was the first to feature this new composition, and from the outside, it looked just like the pennies that had been produced in previous years. The front of the coin still displayed the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln, and the reverse side featured the Lincoln Memorial. These coins were all struck in the same manner as their predecessors, with no indication that they were any different. But there was a problem. A rare and significant error occurred during the minting process that would later make some of these pennies highly coveted. Amid the mass production of 1983 pennies using the new zinc copper planchets, a small but impactful mistake took place at the U.S. Mint. A few of the minting presses were fed with the older copper planchets, which had been intended for the previous year's coins. These copper planchets, made of 95% copper, were the same composition used for pennies before the transition to the zinc-based mix. As a result, a handful of 1983 pennies were struck with copper instead of the new zinc alloy. This seemingly small error would go unnoticed for a while, but once collectors realized what had happened, the value of these rare pennies began to rise. The 1983 copper pennies were an accidental product of the minting process. While the majority of the pennies from that year were made of the new copper-plated zinc material, a few were mistakenly produced with the old copper planchets. This error led to a handful of pennies being struck with a much higher copper content than intended, giving these specific coins distinct characteristics compared to their zinc counterparts. They were slightly heavier, and their color was a deeper shade of copper, much like the pennies produced in earlier decades. At first, collectors didn't pay much attention to these pennies. They were, after all, just another coin from the 1983 series. However, as the years went on, numismatists and coin collectors started noticing the subtle differences between the standard 1983 pennies and these copper variants. The weight, the color, and the feel of the coin were unmistakable once recognized. It quickly became clear that only a very small number of these copper pennies had been made, and that meant they were incredibly rare. When it comes to rare coins, the key factors that determine their value are their rarity, condition, and the historical story they tell. The 1983 copper penny ticked all of these boxes. It was rare, only a handful were produced, and most of those were either lost, spent, or damaged over time. The condition of the coin also played a major role. Because many of these copper pennies were circulated and handled like regular coins, it was difficult to find one in pristine condition. Finding a well-preserved 1983 copper penny became like discovering a hidden treasure for collectors. As interest in these rare pennies grew, their value skyrocketed. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the 1983 copper penny began to make waves in the numismatic community. It was no longer just a curiosity, it was a treasure. Coin auctions began to feature these rarities, and collectors eagerly competed for a chance to own one. As the years went by, the value of these pennies steadily increased, reaching new heights with each passing decade. While it's difficult to pinpoint an exact value for every 1983 copper penny, since prices can fluctuate based on factors like condition and the current market demand, the fact remains that these coins are worth far more than their face value. In some cases, these coins can sell for thousands of dollars, but the highest-selling 1983 copper penny reached an extraordinary price. In 2012, a pristine, well-preserved 1983 copper penny was sold at auction for a remarkable $98,000. This sale cemented the coin's status as one of the most valuable era coins in U.S. history. So, what makes the 1983 copper penny so valuable today? Its rarity is certainly a major factor, but so is the fascinating story behind its creation. A simple minting mistake, an accident during a period of change at the U.S. Mint, produced a coin that has since become a numismatic legend. The 1983 copper penny tells the tale of how a small error in the production process can lead to a coin that becomes incredibly valuable, highly sought after, and a symbol of the unexpected in the world of coin collecting. The 1990 U.S. 1-cent penny. On its face, it's a simple coin, used every day in stores, vending machines, or just tossed into jars and forgotten. For most people, it's just another small piece of copper and zinc, one of the most common coins in the United States. Yet, beneath its seemingly ordinary exterior lies an extraordinary story. The 1990 penny, though a part of regular circulation, carries with it historical significance, an intriguing design, and an unexpected value that will leave collectors and enthusiasts alike in awe. What might seem like an unremarkable coin could, under the right circumstances, be worth far more than its 1-cent face value. The penny, which had been in circulation for centuries, was no exception. In fact, the 1990 penny represented the continuation of a long-standing tradition of U.S. coinage. By this time, the penny's design had not changed for more than 3 decades. The obverse of the penny, featuring the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The reverse side, featuring the image of the Lincoln Memorial, had been in use since 1959, paying tribute to the monument that bears Lincoln's name in Washington, D.C.by. The time the 1990 penny was minted, these two elements, the portrait of Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial, had become iconic representations of U.S. coinage. They were familiar to every American who used coins. But in 1990, while the penny's design remained consistent, there was a significant change in how the coins were made. This change would set the stage for why the 1990 penny, in particular, would become a standout piece in the world of numismatics. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the U.S. Mint was working on updating its processes for producing coins. These updates weren't necessarily dramatic, but they had an impact on the way the coins were made. One of the key elements of the 1990 penny's production involved the introduction of new materials and a shift toward more advanced methods of coin striking. While the composition of the penny had been largely unchanged for years, 95% copper and 5% zinc or tin, there were new challenges to face. The mint was looking for ways to cut costs while maintaining the integrity of its coinage. The growing cost of copper, in particular, had made it increasingly expensive to produce pennies with high copper content. In response to this, the U.S. Mint continued its shift to reducing the copper content in pennies. While this shift had started in 1982, with the introduction of the copper-plated zinc penny, the Mint's work on penny composition was ongoing, as it sought to refine the production process. By 1990, the minting of pennies had become more streamlined, and the overall quality of the coins was increasingly scrutinized to ensure that the coins met the necessary specifications. The penny that emerged in 1990 would be the product of these innovations, a smooth, mass-produced coin that seemed to serve its primary purpose without incident. Yet, what truly sets the 1990 penny apart in the world of numismatics is not its production but its role in the evolution of coin collecting. While the design and composition of the 1990 penny may seem mundane on the surface, there were subtle factors at play that would give certain 1990 pennies an unusual value over time. These factors were primarily tied to the quality of the coin and its condition when it was struck. For collectors, the 1990 penny isn't special simply because it's from that year, rather, its appeal lies in the condition and rarity of certain examples that were struck with a higher level of precision. The U.S. Mint had, by the 1990s, perfected its process for striking coins, but it also began experimenting with more refined techniques for proof coinage. Proof coins are specially made coins that are often struck with polished dies to produce a mirror-like finish. These coins are intended for collectors and are produced in much smaller quantities than circulation coins. In 1990, a number of proof pennies were created at the Philadelphia Mint. These coins were struck using special dies that produced a sharper, clearer image. They were created in limited numbers and were sold to collectors who prized them for their higher quality and rarity. However, even among these proof coins, there were certain examples of the 1990 penny that stood out. These specific pennies, often referred to as deep cameo proofs, have a higher level of contrast between the design and the background. This contrast creates an almost three-dimensional appearance, making the Lincoln portrait and the memorial stand out with dramatic detail. These deep cameo examples are incredibly rare, as the production process was not always perfect, and not every coin was struck with the desired precision. The deep cameo 1990 penny, in particular, became a favorite among collectors because of its visual appeal and rarity. As with most rare coins, the condition of the penny also plays a significant role in determining its value. Coins that were well preserved and kept in excellent condition are far more valuable than those that show signs of wear. Over the years, collectors began to realize that certain 1990 pennies were not only rare but had also been preserved in exceptional condition, meaning that their value would rise over time. Coins graded by professional numismatic organizations such as the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, (NGC), or the Professional Coin Grading Service, (PCGS), are given a specific grade based on their condition, and the higher the grade, the more valuable the coin. A 1990 penny in mint state, particularly one graded at the highest levels, can fetch a significant price at auction. So, how much can a 1990 penny be worth today? The most valuable 1990 pennies are those that have been preserved in pristine condition or are unique due to their unusual minting errors. The 1990 penny, though not known for having major error types like some other years, has a few noteworthy examples. Some coins were struck off-center, resulting in slightly misaligned designs, which collectors find appealing. Other coins were struck with a higher degree of detail than usual, giving them a sharper and more distinct appearance. One of the most impressive discoveries of a 1990 penny came in the early 2000s when a coin, graded as mint state and in flawless condition, sold for a staggering $83,000. This record-setting sale stunned the numismatic community and brought a level of attention to the 1990 penny that few expected. Though this kind of sale is rare, it serves as a reminder of the potential hidden value that a seemingly common penny can have. Up next, the 2017 US 1-cent penny might seem like just another year in a long tradition of pennies produced by the US Mint. For most people, it's a coin they encounter daily, often tossed aside or spent without much thought. However, what many don't realize is that this seemingly ordinary penny carries a fascinating story and an unexpected twist. While it might not be as famous as some of its predecessors or as rare as certain error coins, the 2017 penny holds significant value in the numismatic world. It's a coin that, in certain circumstances, has been known to sell for an astounding amount, making collectors take a second look at their change and think, could I have one of those? To truly appreciate the 2017 penny, we need to understand the backdrop of the time it was minted. The year 2017 was marked by a number of significant events in the United States, both politically and economically. The country had recently witnessed a shift in leadership, with a new president taking office. Economically, the country was in the midst of an ongoing recovery from the 2008 financial crisis, and many people were still grappling with the effects of that recession. In the world of coinage, however, things were a little more stable, with the penny continuing its reign as one of the most frequently circulated coins in the U.S. Treasury. As in most years, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies in 2017, striking them in various mints around the country, including the Philadelphia and Denver mints. The design of the penny remained unchanged, with Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the familiar Union shield on the reverse. This shield had been introduced in 2010 as part of a new design to replace the long-standing Lincoln Memorial reverse. The shield design, representing the protection and strength of the U.S., was part of an ongoing series of changes to modernize coinage and reflect the nation's values. One of the interesting things about the 2017 penny is that it was part of a broader trend in coinage production at the time. The United States was facing increasing debate about the future of the penny. Many questioned whether the penny should continue to be produced at all, considering its rising production costs. In fact, the cost to produce a penny had been exceeding its face value for several years by 2017. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, the production cost of a penny was as high as 2 cents, despite it still being worth just 1 cent. The rising cost of copper, zinc, and other metals used to make the penny was a significant factor in this cost increase. However, despite the economic arguments against it, the penny remained in circulation, and the mint continued to produce it by the billions. The design of the 2017 penny was not revolutionary in itself, but that didn't mean there weren't notable elements to consider. As with any coin, minor changes, minting errors, and unique characteristics can make a big difference in its value. Some of the most important factors that would later contribute to the 2017 penny's appeal involved the way it was struck and the various conditions in which it was found. While most of the 2017 pennies were standard circulation coins, a handful of special editions were also minted. In the world of coin collecting, condition is everything. When it comes to modern pennies like the 2017 edition, coins that have been well preserved, kept in pristine condition, or graded highly by professional numismatic organizations can be worth a lot more than their face value. The majority of pennies that circulate in daily life are often worn down through use, exposed to the elements, and subjected to handling by countless people. A penny that has been kept in near-perfect condition, however, can be a valuable find for a collector. This is especially true if the coin has been preserved in a way that maintains its sharp details, original luster, and a lack of visible wear. While most 2017 pennies were simply produced for regular circulation, a few special editions were also struck. These were often proof coins, which are produced in limited quantities for collectors rather than for everyday use. Proof coins are specially made with polished dies and are intended to create a much sharper, clearer image than regular coins. These coins are often sold in sets or as individual pieces for those interested in collecting high-quality examples of U.S. coinage. The 2017 penny was no exception, with several proof sets produced that included the 2017 1-cent coin. However, the true value of a 2017 penny isn't determined simply by its composition or design, it's determined by its rarity, condition, and any unique minting errors that may have occurred. And this is where the story of the 2017 penny takes an interesting turn. Although the 2017 penny is far from one of the most famous or high-profile error coins in U.S. history, there are certain examples of the coin that have captured the attention of collectors, pushing their value much higher than one might expect. Minting errors are a significant factor in the world of numismatics. Coins that are struck with flaws, whether through misalignments, double strikes, off-center impressions, or other issues, are highly prized by collectors. These errors can make a coin unique and rare, giving it an allure that no standard coin can match. The 2017 penny, like many modern coins, is not immune to minting mistakes, and it is these errors that have contributed to its increased value on the market. For instance, some of the 2017 pennies were struck with double dies, meaning that the design was stamped onto the coin twice, creating a blurry or distorted effect. Double die coins are among the most sought-after errors for collectors because they are relatively rare and create a visually distinct pattern that sets them apart from regular coins. Coins like this can command higher prices, especially if they are in excellent condition and have been graded by a professional organization. In addition to double die errors, there were also some 2017 pennies that were struck off-center, meaning that the design was misaligned during the minting process. Off-center coins are another category of error coin that is highly prized by collectors. Because these coins are usually only a small percentage of the total coins minted, they are considered rare and can be sold for much more than their face value. Depending on the severity of the off-center strike, these pennies can fetch anywhere from a few dollars to hundreds of dollars or more. But it's not just errors that make the 2017 penny stand out. Some coins from this year are valuable simply because they are part of a larger set or because they have been well preserved and graded as being in mint condition. Coins that are part of a complete set of proof coins or that have been professionally graded with a high grade can also fetch impressive prices. A 2017 penny in perfect condition, with sharp details and no visible wear, can sometimes sell for a significant amount, particularly if it is sold at auction or through a specialized dealer. So, how much is a 2017 penny really worth? For most people, it may only be worth 1 cent. But for collectors, especially those seeking out high-grade coins or error varieties, the 2017 penny can be worth much more. The highest-selling 2017 penny to date was an error coin, one with a significant minting flaw, that sold for an eye-popping $19,000. This sale made headlines in the numismatic world, proving that even modern pennies can be worth far more than their face value when they possess rarity, quality, and a unique story.